All right, my first random thought is why the sport of volleyball has not moved to two divisions. Because it has not been since 2013 since a public high school has been in the Final Four. And I define a public high school by what it is: a public high school where if you live in a district, you should go to that high school. And that's not against anybody that doesn't go to their public high school, but that's what I'm going to define a public high school as. So in other words, I don't consider Newark Charter a public high school. I don't consider Charter School of Wilmington a public high school. I don't consider Sussex Academy a public high school. Because it's a charter school. You have to apply to get in and you have to be selected to go there. And then, of course, there's the private schools. So basically, it has been since 2013, since Concord High School was in the Final Four, that a true public high school has been in the Final Four. So what that does is it goes against my philosophy, Marty, of every team should have somewhat of a shot to at least finish 500 or get into the state tournament when they start their season. And that doesn't happen in the sport of volleyball. So I'm not sure what the delay has been. They've moved soccer to two divisions. They moved field hockey to two divisions. They've moved baseball. Have they moved to two divisions? Or is that still one? They have not. And basketball, they have not. And you could argue why they haven't. But they moved it. They did it for soccer and they did it for field hockey because it became a very lopsided state tournament. And that's exactly what's happened with the sport of volleyball. It's a very elite few schools that are in that volleyball final eight every single year. And then the Final Four, it gets even more narrowed down. So I'm hoping somebody takes a good look at that and decides that it is time to make volleyball a two-division sport. They won't do it the way I would recommend it, which is take all the true publics and put them in one division and take the charter schools and the private schools and put them in the other division. What they'll do is what they've done with soccer and what they've done with field hockey, which is look at the successes, the school sizes, all that other stuff, and split them up that way. But if you're going to do that, you're still going to have teams that are going to be in the situation. It's not going to solve the whole thing. We always use the argument, if they ever do this with basketball and they do it strictly by school population, Sanford's going to be playing in Division II.
Oh my goodness.
And how fun would that be for the rest of the teams in Division II? So they need to look at it sort of like they did with football. And they have to come up with a system that puts the best teams in Division I and the teams that are not so good in Division II and let them battle out for their own state championship. So that's my first random thought as they wrap up volleyball season.
And I'll just follow up real quick. Primarily, and I will say, girls sports more than anything have to go to that the two-tier system because volleyball, girls basketball is horrific in that there's four teams basically every year that are going to be in the Final Four, and the games through the first to second and quarterfinal rounds are usually blowouts. So I'm with you 100%. Now we do see to a lesser degree on the boys side there, but for volleyball, girls basketball, it's the same teams every year. And again, it's the privates and it is the Sanfords, the Tower Hills, the charter schools. DMA is always up there. So I couldn't agree with you more on that as far as taking a look at some of the other sports and seeing if we can do what we did with football. All right, my first one, you said that it had been since 2013 since a public school had been in. Well, I'm going to go back to 2013 as well. That's when the NCAA changed a rule, which I did not know. And I've shamed myself by not knowing this rule for 8 years. I can't believe I didn't know this. But yesterday in the Miami-Florida State football game, Miami was trying to drive down for a winning field goal. They hit a long pass. They got down. They had no timeouts left, and they went to spike the ball. The clock ticked down from 3 to 2. The ball was spiked, and the clock was stopped at 1. Miami went to set up their next play, or their field goal. The referee got on the microphone and said, by rule, there must be 3 seconds on the clock when a ball is spiked to stop the clock. So by rule, if you spike the ball with less than 3 seconds left, the game is over. And I had to go online. There's only a very small handful of these games that have happened over the last 8 years. I don't get it. It makes no sense. The announcers had no idea. And these were some of the top ABC or ESPN announcers on this game. They had no idea this rule existed either. It is absolutely ridiculous. They showed one later in the night where a person snapped the ball at 3, clocked it at 2. You still had 2 full seconds. The game ended because there has to be 3 seconds remaining when the ball is clocked. So there is a rule I didn't know of. NCAA, I don't know what made you change this rule. I do know before instant replay, which was a long time before that, They had problems where, you get down to 1 second, and all of a sudden you snap it, and God, is there tenths of a second left? Is there whatever? But 3 seconds is a long time in a football game in terms of being able to clock the ball and continue on. So anyway, anyone out there who didn't know that, now you do. And if you did, good on you. I did not. But in my opinion, it ended up costing Miami that game because I don't think they knew the rule.
Yeah.
I think they would have managed things a little bit better had they known.
Well, it makes no sense because when you spike the ball, it's an incomplete pass and the clock stops.
Yes.
So there just has to be some sort of time on the clock, even if a team's usually doing that to bring on the field goal unit.
Yep.
And so it's not like it's impossible to get the field goal unit on, the clock stops. So yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, no sense at all. All right. The other thing that doesn't make sense to me, Marty, and I'm going back to volleyball, is why they continue to play the consolation game. And I think I've beefed about this before in different ways. But the reality of it is it's the only sport in the state of Delaware where you lose in the semifinals. You got to come back 3 or 4 nights later and play in a completely meaningless game against a team that is also in the same situation. I can't imagine that the girls enjoy doing it. Now, I've talked to some people who say, oh yeah, the girls love it. And I want to say, has anybody ever asked the girls if they really love coming back, having to continue to practice for 5 days? I think the quarterfinals were on Thursday. I forget the semifinals were on Thursday and the game's on Monday night or something like that. So, it's not even like you're coming back the next night. It's not like you're at the Final Four where you're all in the place anyway. You're spending the night in a hotel and you're going to be there the next day. Yeah, why not play another game? Makes no sense to me. It costs money because they got to get into the Bob Carpenter Center earlier. Don't tell me there's a big crowd coming to watch a consolation game. The only people that are there to watch the consolation game are the people that are there to watch the finals and want to get a good seat, and the parents of the athletes who are playing in a consolation game. And I guarantee you, if you ask the parents if they're honest, none of them want to be there watching their kid playing in a consolation game. And I'm a parent. I love watching my kid play. In fact, he's playing against, he's playing in the semifinals on Tuesday night up at Sally's. If they lose, the last thing I would want to do is have to go back to a stadium on Saturday 2 hours before the championship game that my son is not in and play a meaningless game. And so that makes no sense to me why they continue to play this volleyball consolation game. And a lot of these volleyball players that get that far in the tournament in the state of Delaware are playing volleyball in college. And how awful would it be for somebody to tear an ACL in a completely meaningless game? Nobody should text me and tell me the game is not meaningless. It is completely meaningless game. And so why would you risk injury in a completely meaningless game at that point? So I just don't get it. So here's my plea once again to the volleyball committee. Please do away with the consolation game. It costs the sport money. It costs the girls the risk of injury, and there is just no need for it. Play the championship and make that the highlight of the night. It is the highlight of the night, but I just don't get the consolation game. Only sport in the state of Delaware that doesn't.
I'll be honest. I was 100% with you until last year when Mike Lang, our buddy Mike Lang from 302 Sports, kind of came back at you with this.
Yeah, and I love that Mike on to talk about it. We should have him on the debate.
Yep, because Mike has said constantly when he talks to these kids, it's almost like, and he caught me with this one. He said, these imagine you get told you get to play with these girls that you love and that you've done so much with one more time. And it almost hit me. It's almost like an exhibition more than anything because it is for third place. But he totally stole me on the idea of why they play this game. And I wondered if, because I'm with you, my first thought was, you and I used to do the basketball semifinals. And I remember when we would see the volleyball third place game would be coming up and we'd think, God, can you imagine if these kids had to come back and play for third place? But apparently this subculture, this volleyball subculture, they love it. And it's one of those things, like I said, he sold me on they get one more chance to play with each other again, and they do it in this phenomenal arena, by the way, which, again, the semifinals were not at the Bob this year, so it's only the third place game and the championship game. So, yeah, that's kind of different. I was 100% with you last year, and then Mike Lang swung me to the other side for the third. I would not want it to become a regular occurrence for other sports.
Right.
But it does seem to be pretty ingrained in volleyball, so I'll go with that. All right, my last one is G. Johnson, who's a photographer in Delaware. He puts some phenomenal shots all over Twitter. He responded to something I wrote, and I can't recall exactly what I wrote, but he wrote back, how are they doing all state this year? And I'll be honest, I hadn't given that a thought. And I don't know that anyone has.
You're talking
because
about
I haven't-
football. You're talking
football,
about
excuse
football
me,
in
for
particular.
football.
Yep.
I have not heard a single thing about how they're going to handle All-State. Now, again, it's a team sport. And, I think we both have feelings about how All-State works and the political nature of it and stuff like that sometimes. But they've always had an all-state team, and it encompasses the whole state. Now that they've taken steps to realign the three divisions, and G agreed with this as well, I don't see how you could do it any other way than a 1A, a 2A, and a 3A all-state team. Now, maybe you limit it to just a single team instead of a second team, and you have honorable mention, because then we're getting into participation trophy territory with
Right.
the few number of teams in these divisions. But it really got me thinking. I had not given a single thought to it. And I have not heard a single football person. I have not heard Brad Myers or any of the other guys talk about it. I haven't talked about that on YouTube. And it's just kind of curious as to where they're going with this. So it's just an interesting kind of side note. I'm sure some people have given us thought, especially some of the players, but it'll be interesting to see how they do this because we're in a whole new world again with the three separate classes. So it's going to be interesting. You got any thoughts on how they'll handle that?
Well, I don't know how they're going to handle it. I tell you how I would hope they would handle it, or I think they should handle it, is do it like they've always done it. And you pick the best 11 kids on offense, the best 11 kids on defense, and your best punter and your best kicker and your best returners. Because to me, there's a difference between selecting an all-state team versus having a chance to win a state championship, if that makes sense.
Agree. I agree.
Like, if I'm first team all state in class 1, am I really first team all state? And the same argument can be made. There could be a class, let's say there's a class 3 kicker who's first team, they got to pick a kicker that's first team all state, but the best kicker is in the state. It plays for Seaford and I don't even know if there's a kicker at Seaford, but just throwing it out there. So it's really not a first team all state team if the kid who makes it for, is not the best kicker. Let's use kicker as an example. The best kicker should be based on the best kicker, whether they're in class 1, 2, or 3 is my thinking.
I thought about that way too. And I thought, look at Braden Davis at Middletown, and then look at Chris Albero at Archmere.
Right.
I don't honestly know. If you ask me, I'd say Chris Albero had the better season. Obviously, Braden Davis is the guy that's going to South Carolina. The schedules they play are so vastly different. It's going to be really tough. And again, it's not, all-state should never be the focus of anyone's season. It's about winning a championship, as you said, but it is a part of reality. It's something we pick the all-conference teams, which I've never even heard that discussed. I assume that went out the window. I don't know if we're going to have all 1A teams, and maybe, you know what? Maybe that's the solution. They have an all-state team, and then they have an all 1A, all 2A, it's sort of a conference kind of thing. I was surprised, to be honest with you, of the schools that kind of championed the fact they won their district. I hadn't really heard about that because, as far as I know, there's no prize for it. I don't think you get a trophy for winning.
No, but those are schools that never won anything in football before.
True.
In some cases.
To your point, these schools and what I had said a couple of weeks ago about schools having pep rallies that haven't had them in years and bringing people out to games because they mean something. I liked seeing that, despite the fact that, again, there's been nobody's getting a class 1A District 1 trophy or banner to put in their building, as far as I know. Now, maybe that changes down the line. But much in the same way that Mike Lang got one with volleyball, you got me on the 3-tier system because now I still have major questions about how it runs, but I love seeing the opportunities given to some of these schools. Somebody went on Twitter first thing after the brackets were announced today and put, how in the world is Odessa at 3-7 a playoff team? And it's just, you got to follow the season to know that they've been a great story in their district. They earned it. Yep. Now they took it on the chin from some of the better teams, but again, they're freshmen and sophomores. And there's just all these little nuggets, the Tatnall story, St. Andrews. There's all these little nuggets sprinkled in now of these teams that nobody heard of. Nobody ever put these guys in the sports pages for decades. And all of a sudden, there's a renewed sense of optimism in these programs because their football teams are performing pretty well.
Yeah, and just to wrap up the first team all-state thing, and when you mentioned Chris Albero, I thought of it. Now, this wouldn't be his case because he's a class 3 player. But let's say there's a quarterback let's say the quarterback from Archmere. His name escapes me. I know you know.
Well, that is Chris Albero.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I had the Sally's kid in my mind.
Yep.
So Chris Albero. So let's say that he's named first team all state for class 2.
Right.
Does that mean that every quarterback in class 3 is better than him? So my point being, if he's named second team all state, and they're not doing it by classes, to me, that's a higher honor. That means you're the second best quarterback in the state of Delaware.
I don't disagree.
If you're only going to be named first team quarterback for class 2, well, that how many more better quarterbacks are there? So I think that, and here's my other reasoning that I don't think they should change this system, because we didn't add a lot more kids. We didn't add any more teams. So the first team all-state selection, the first team and the second team, and I forget if they even do a third team in the honorable mention, it's still being pulled from the same number of kids. And so it'd be different if all of a sudden we added 15 more high schools to the state of Delaware. And then maybe you think, geez, there's a lot more kids. Maybe we should do it by class, but we didn't do that. We kept the exact same number of schools and close to the exact same number of kids. We just reclassified everybody. So I'm kind of hoping that they do that. The fact that we haven't heard about a change, that lends me to think that that is the way they're going to do it. I would have thought that if it was going to be changed, they would have, even if they didn't decide that at the beginning of the season, somebody would have it's been brought up. Obviously, we're not the first ones to mention it.
Has to have been talked about somewhere.
And so they would have made this decision at a football committee meeting halfway through the season that this is how we're going to do the first team all-state team. The coaches have to know, because they're the ones that vote on this. It's not just the media. The media gets a vote, but the coaches do vote in on that. So it will be interesting to see how they finally do it. But I would like to see them keep it the way it is, so that the first team quarterback is the best quarterback in the state, not just the best quarterback in his class. I like your thought that maybe they do a class 3 all team, and that replaces the conference teams. We'll see. But I could also see that not happening this year, that they just continue to do what they've always done. Yeah. And then next year they think it through that, hey, let's do away with these all conference teams and let's make it an all class team. But there's still only one all-state team go that way. All right, speaking of all-state, Fahmir Ali, does that name ring a bell, Marty?
It does. We watched him play quite a few times.
Watched him quite a few times. Started as a freshman at Sally's, went on to Mount Pleasant. He's now playing at the College of Charleston, and he got there after going to the Beckley Prep School in West Virginia, and then he went to Radford University last year. He led the teams in points and assists, and now he's off to the College of Charleston. I talked to former Mount Pleasant coach Lisa Sullivan, Marty, who, here's a teaser, is going to be coming on the show at some point to tell her side of the story. Not sure when, but it is going to happen. And one of the odd things about that story, here's one more thing. Fahmir Ali, when he went to Radford, he asked to come back to Mount Pleasant after his year down in West Virginia to officially sign his letter of intent. They told him, no, thank you. Now, you would have thought Mount Pleasant, you must have 1,000 people signing letters of intent to go to college. That's not the case at Mount Pleasant. And so you would have thought they would have loved the publicity, love for people to see that hey, we put out good kids. Some of them go to college. Some of them go to college on full scholarships. Look at what Fahmir Ali did. And this is a kid who started at Sally's. And he came to Mount Pleasant, and look how well he did. First team all-state in basketball and all-state player in football as well. But they didn't think they could take the time.
And what a tribute to Lisa and the school for him even making that decision and wanting to do that. Amazing. That's
a whole nother issue. Well, I don't mean to get sidetracked with this, but do mark your calendars, because on January 5th, the College of Charleston is going to play Hofstra. What a great story. You got Fahmir Ali playing against his former Mount Pleasant teammate, Kayvon Kramer, who, if you remember, had that knee issue, the ACL. Then they had to do it again, and basically ended up not finishing his high school career at Mount Pleasant.
He never played after his sophomore season.
He sat on the bench and watched his team and supported his team, and hats off to him for doing that. So mark your calendar for that. And again, we'll let you know when Lisa's going to be coming on to tell her side of the story. So that's the final random thought. Marty?